you've done it?
Oh, I've got it. Yeah.
Cool.
Let's wait a sec. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 2021 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. So this month, we're back at full strength. Stephen has returned from his absence of 1 month, which turns it into a 2 months without Stephen affair, but we've all survived.
That's devastating.
Yeah, and we've got Ben, and I'm here. And I guess before we jump in, I guess any interesting or big news that anyone wants to share before we jump in? No.
Nah.
It seems like it feels like a really low energy night tonight for some reason.
It does.
It's just been a lot of it's information overload, I think.
Yeah.
Between Ignite and the post days, I think there's been a lot of tiredness associated, keeping on top of everything that's coming out. So obviously, that's why we're going to go through this session.
Yeah. Okay, so if you just to sort of put things into perspective here with the recap, probably like honestly, the big reason why I like doing the recaps is it forces me to go back through what was actually announced, because it's so easy to miss the onslaught of things that are sort of coming through. And generally it's not the things that maybe people in this group would be particularly interested in that tend to get a lot of the attention from people in general. So while there are a lot of people getting really excited about mesh, the rest of us were reminiscing about the thing that used to be called mesh. But just to sort of go through like a quick breakdown of, I guess, the areas that we'll cover off. So things that were either announced at Ignite or pre-announced for Ignite, or things that have been available in preview for a while that have finally gone GA. That's really the focus of what we've got in here. Now, there's probably there's definitely a ton of stuff that we don't have in here. So if there's something that you're really passionate about that is in one of these categories that we haven't covered, or something that's not in one of these categories at all that you still think is worth talking about, drop a note into chat or unmute yourself when we get to the appropriate area, just to provide your input to it. So I guess before we do kick off, is there anything that's kind of not listed here that anyone thought might be covered, just to maybe give us a chance to think about it before we add something random in? Like if you do have something, just drop a note in the chat window. The chances are there's probably somebody on the call that one of us can nominate to cover. And we've got a good group of people that we can throw under the bus today. So I'm looking at that list going, who do I choose from that list to nominate to answer questions they're not necessarily prepared for? Okay, so let's jump in, and we'll just sort of start off with the first one, the new compliance and security exams that were.
Mark?
Yeah.
So our good friend Philmy is asked to include Viva.
Oh yeah.
No. I think
you don't want to think about that, Mark.
I think
take a moment.
Yeah. I was going to make my Spice Girls Viva Forever joke, but at some point I'll get sick of using it. So I've kind of got to save that one for occasional usage, so it's not always expected. No, there is no. So okay, so let me give the real reason why we're not going to talk about Viva is because it was announced way before Ignite. There we go, easy.
Easy fix.
And it's also not really something we'd spend too much time covering anyway.
Not really core to management either, is it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. So thank you. So Phil has just put his hand up. So any random questions that we don't feel like answering, Phil has just nominated himself as the.
That's so nice of you.
Right, that's a random guy
Phil,
in a random world.
Phil, middle name, nice guy. Okay,
now your middle name random.
Yeah. So look, so with the exams, look, for this group, like unless your employer pays for it, I probably wouldn't take SC 900. All it's going to do is allow you to set a new land speed record for doing an exam. So it took me a minute longer than my fastest exam time so far.
What's your fastest exam?
Well, it was 12 minutes.
Whoa.
This one, but that was 12 minutes for like 32 questions. SC 900 on a per question basis was way more impressive. It was an extra minute, but it was 51 questions.
Whoa.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so yeah, look, it's pretty straightforward, but I guess the thing overall, like 3 of the 4 of these, they're not M365 exams. They're Azure and Microsoft 365 exams, which is a good thing. Because anyone who tries to go, oh, look, I work with M365, I don't touch anything Azure. It's like not even an Azure Active Directory. And they go, oh, well, of course I have to work with that. And it's like, okay, so you either lied to me or you were confused. Which one is it? Now, so that one.
What are we talking about here, Mark?
Now for SC200, this one is like about 50, like it's close to half of the exam is Sentinel. So I would highly recommend this if you need to force yourself to learn Sentinel and you need to sort of be like have some kind of desired outcome, such as passing an exam and getting a certification. Now, but even the Sentinel stuff, because so much of it is like log analytics and KQL, etc., a lot of the Azure Defender stuff has got some overlap with that. So if you're fairly familiar with log analytics, and you probably don't have to be all that familiar with, as long as you know KQL, you probably don't have to know all that much about Sentinel to be able to get through this one. As long as you've got like broad Azure, it's not keyword query language. That's the SharePoint thing.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
This is the other KQL.
Of course.
Is this
I guess that's
Kusto?
Kusto, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Coming from Exchange or Office 365 world, you're used to the K meaning something else.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I thought, because I don't deal with SharePoint, when I saw some SharePoint stuff and they were saying keyword search language, I'm like, what? That's not what the K is for. But yeah, so this one, I think, like anyone who's spent some time in Azure Monitor, log analytics, etc., you probably wouldn't need to spend too much time with Sentinel to get through the Sentinel section. Now, the Defender side was fairly straightforward. It was, I think, I only really got Defender for, actually, yeah, a few Defender for endpoint, a few Defender 0365, and maybe one Defender identity question in it. And that was just like a, when not installing the agent on a DC kind of scenario. SC300 is exactly what it claims to be. It's an identity and access administrator exam. So any of you who know the difference between identity protection and PIM and would be able to get through that one. Now that one was pretty straightforward. No real surprises in that one. And the one that I found toughest, but it's like just not something I really deal with all that much, was the information protection one. Like that just jumped into areas that I've never looked at, and I knew I was in trouble with that one when I was going through some of the prep content for it, because it's like, oh, every page I'm learning way too many new things, which means that I do not know this topic at all. But I'm not in a good position to say if it was a good, bad, easy or tough exam, because I just don't know enough about the content. I guess if I pass, it means it was too easy, or they put too much of an accelerator on any answer I got correct to push me over the line. But that's I've got no confidence of passing that, because I just don't know that content at all. But hey, it was free, so it doesn't hurt. So with these, there doesn't seem to be any kind of all up security cert that they're sort of pushing you towards. Each one of these is basically going to get you, or at least, that this will get you the fundamentals. This would get you ops analyst in terms of cert. So there's no like all up like Azure, expert type thing. Like it kind of would make sense maybe if they combined it with the Azure or M365 security exams, but I'm kind of wondering what the purpose of those exams is. now that these exist. So I'm wondering if AZ500 and MS500 disappear because these definitely consume everything that's in them, but maybe not in as much detail because, you know, that covers a hell of a lot more.
Mm.
But look, I think most of you would be able to get through identity and access, no problem. And yeah, don't worry about 900. I'm just looking at chat.
There's a training poster there that you should hit, which is aka.ms/train cert poster.
Oh, that's cool.
And it gives you hop links all the way through everything. So as an example, if you want to look at like what's required for the MD100 exam, you can click on MD100 and it'll go through to that exam.
That's really cool.
Okay. Oh, and it's just been updated. Excellent.
Oh, wow.
I wonder what words they changed. Let's have a look.
When do I really need to redo mine?
I know they have.
Next
no,
year.
they have actually scrubbed it a bit.
Yeah.
Let's see if it still uses any old terminology. Actually, no, it's not that one. In MD101. Let's see if it's got. It talks about MD-ATP. I'm assuming that it probably does, even though this one's just been updated as well. Yeah, there we go. It's almost like I've seen these things happen before. I need to call a manager and say, and have a complaint about that one. Okay, that's easy enough. Okay, so yeah, nothing too surprising with these. Like all up, I think this SOC or the analyst exam is probably the hot ticket in terms of getting a good overview of everything, especially the Sentinel one. So that's probably the one that if someone said, which of these three should I do? That's the one I'd push them to, unless these two were just a gimme for them. So actually just one other thing. So for these, I just went through so they've already put together learning paths to prep for these. This one for SC400, I would not give the prep material a pass. There's entire chunks of content that are missing from it. But the other ones, I think, did a pretty good job of covering what was, knowledge that would translate to things that were useful in the exam.
Nice.
Okay, does anyone want to jump on this one?
I think Ben's the expert here.
That's hilarious. No, I am not the expert at all.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's keep it simple then. Nothing really changing overall in terms of functionality, at least, as part of this announcement. The announcement is they're combining the two mobile apps into a single mobile app. So the standalone tunnel app that I think is still in preview and hasn't made GA, it will be one of those cases where something goes through private preview, public preview, and never hits GA. So it's something else you can use as an example of why it's sometimes risky to use preview software in a production environment. But all the functionality is being rolled across. The question that seemed to trigger in most of the places where I saw it being discussed was people saying, does that mean that I have to be licensed for both if I want to use the app? And it's like, no, whatever you're licensed for is what you get to use. And I guess if it's someone who's already licensed for Defender for Endpoint, I really struggle to believe that there'd be too many people with Endpoint Defender licensing who don't already have Intune licensing. The opposite of that, I can imagine that, actually, not I can imagine, I know there's a lot of people who do have Intune licensing without Defender for Endpoint licensing, which I think is where some of that confusion comes in. But you just use whatever functionality you've got. You can't magically unlock features you don't have or anything like that.
Well, no, so Mark, you can magically unlock features.
Yeah.
What you need to do is buy the license.
Oh,
and
true.
Then it magically unlocks it for you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't gone through and signed up for the preview yet. I guess I should, so I can actually use my own screenshots instead of the ones I stole off the blog post. So, but you'll notice though that I actually cut the images up. I sliced them so that I could fit them this way. So I think just sort of that slight editing means I can claim it as my own work. That's how copyright law works, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so that one, yeah, that one was fairly straightforward, but it was just the, yeah, I guess it's just more that licensing side that was the issue. Is anyone using Defender for Endpoint on Android or iOS? No. So some of the other feedback that I was seeing that like I don't really know, and this maybe the screenshots are not a good indicator, but some of the feedback that I was seeing that people who were sort of nervous about Tunnel being added into Defender, there was like some people were saying that the Defender app likes to consume battery. And I'm looking at the battery icon in these images thinking, that looks like a proof point. The battery icons are very low. They're not at red level yet.
Or the screen capture was being done on a test device that didn't have a stable battery.
That could be the case. And that was probably like the other bit of feedback, or people concerned that that even if you're only using one of the features, that both features would be consuming power. And I think all of that stuff was shot down pretty quickly.
I'd assume it would be.
Yeah. Now, there was a ton of Azure AD stuff. Probably the biggest challenge I had was not realizing how much of the stuff that I thought was in general availability was still in preview. Like it's not something I even try to keep up with anymore. It's like, yeah. So probably the big one here is passwordless authentication. And I couldn't figure out why were people getting so excited. And it's like, oh, because you work for organizations that can't use, aren't allowed to use preview software in any form in production.
That would prefer not to use preview.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Except when Microsoft tells them to use that to get the thing they need to make the solution work.
That's right.
Yeah. So that one's pretty straightforward. Now the next one, temporary access past public preview. So this is just so that you can get a one-time login password so that you can register the account and sign up and start getting access, but with the goal of then getting you enrolled with something like Authenticator. So just like an easier way to get people set up with new accounts, for example. Now the next one, the conditional access authentication context.
Sorry, Mark. So the temporary access pass, look, the other use case for that is new employees. So you can get them onto autopilot and things like that quicker. So you basically, when you get your new laptop, you'll get given a process to get your temporary access pass, to be able to sign in, to get your details, and then continue on. But that's the workflow for that one as well.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Especially due to the COVID scenario where there's a lot more devices being shipped out. How do you get a password to an end user without 5 people seeing it on the way through? Because you've got the IT admin setting the password, then it goes to HR, then it goes to the manager, and then it goes to the end user. And anywhere in between. So this is a scenario of how you can do that a little bit more securely.
Nice. Okay, now with the conditional access authentication context, the details are fairly thin on the ground in terms of how this works. So if anyone can jump in to cover it off, but the information that I've been able to pull together on that one is basically indicating that you might be signed into an app accessing non-sensitive data, but as soon as you start trying to access sensitive data, then that's where things like the risk could be elevated, MFA could be prompted, etc., as opposed to it being something that happens, based on user risk or sign-in risk, the policies you're applying at the app level. So this is something that there doesn't seem to be much documentation on it or any real documentation apart from like a couple of bullet points in a couple of announcement posts. But if anyone does know more about that, please jump in and share what you're allowed to if you do have anything that's publicly available. But otherwise, I think based on all the changes that have occurred with conditional access over the last year or so, we can probably re-add conditional access as a topic we can go through in more detail again, based on stuff that's come out of preview, new features have been added, because it's got a hell of a lot more in it than even a year ago. Now with App Proxy, the header-based authentication, that went into preview late last year. It's just hit general availability. And I think some of the workloads in particular that one was important for were people trying to publish their Oracle apps via Azure AD. So anything that allows people, to, to use Azure AD as the way to get access to on-prem stuff, step in the right direction. Then the other one is more of a latency related one, the geo routing public preview. So basically all you're doing here is saying connect to an AAD endpoint closer to where the user is what that one seems to be indicating. So the best that I was able to figure out with it was, or my guess as to how it's working is, rather than relying on your ISP or your telco to figure out the best way to get you to that point, it seems more like that you'd be hitting the Azure network and it would be doing the most effective routing to get you through to where you need. But again, not a huge amount of information on that one just yet. It only just went into public preview, but I think that's one of the the questions that you always get is, well, what if someone's on the other side of the world? What's performance going to be like? Then the final one, just the more on the ADFS side around, rather than just Microsoft having a whole bunch of documentation around what have you got and here's how you can move it, to just using Azure AD natively instead, now that you can start getting this information from the Azure AD portal instead. So I think this is probably a good one, especially for orgs that maybe they investigated things a while ago and they said, oh, this can't be moved for whatever reason. But over time, as more of the blockers get removed, all of a sudden this will start lighting up that, hey, these are things that you can start moving from this point on. So again, just for people who are hanging on to ADFS for the wrong reasons, I think hopefully at some point in time we can stop talking about ADFS unless it's purely a Windows Server conversation. Like, I look forward to that day when someone says, can we talk about ADFS? And we say, no, we aren't talking about Windows Server features today. Like, I don't think we're quite there
What's
yet.
ADFS?
It's a Windows Server feature.
Oh, okay.
This is a cloud session. We don't talk about Windows Server in.
We don't talk
actually,
about
we do on the last slide. Actually, we do in a couple of slides here, but in the right context.
Exactly.
Imagine taking on a new role that was deploying new ADFS environments inside of customers.
No, thank you.
What a joy that would be.
Because you'd have to then do certificate key trust, so you could do Windows Hello for Business, which is not a great experience. So
yeah. Okay, so universal print, we've covered this a couple of times in the past, but it's fine. This is another example of it. It's finally hit general availability. But a couple of updates from this one is just in the partner details. It just goes through and lists all of the partner solutions, whether it's hardware or software vendors. So that post has got a bunch of them in there. But the second one was a bit of a surprise, the additional print volume. And this, I don't know if this was heavily promoted in advance or maybe I just completely ignored it. But basically it's not unlimited print volume with what you get included as part of these. So even if you take a look at the wording they use, like available for, notice it doesn't say included with.
Yeah.
So I want to go back through old versions of docs to see if that was changed at some point that correlates to when they decided that this was actually going to be something that potentially had a cost. But effectively you get, for each licensed user, you get 5 print jobs per month for that user, which seems to be somewhat on the skimpy end, I think. I don't know what wording I really want to use around that one, but you can buy additional print. Yeah, you can buy additional print packs or for, what was it, 500 print jobs for $30 a month, something along those lines. So like, it's not a, like, I guess it's just one of those things where orgs will need to evaluate it. Now, I guess because it was a preview feature, like, I don't know if there was ever any promise that it would be permanently free for unlimited usage, etc. But the best example that I've sort of been able to convince myself that this isn't completely the wrong move is, when you look at the audio conferencing that's included with like the appropriate M365 or O365 licenses, you get like an amount per user per month. And if you want more than that, you top it up. And I think basically this is pretty much that same model. You get some for free, but if you're in this case, I don't even want to say if you're a heavy user, because a lot of orgs I could see 5 print jobs per user would be consumed within a morning, yet alone a day or a week. But then balanced across the org, maybe it's not a bad thing. But I think there's still a lot of role. I think we've got to sit back and watch what happens around that one.
Also, and feel free anyone to confirm me incorrect here, but if you signed up for the preview, you'll have that for the next 12 months. Outside of this GA licensing model. So if anyone jumped on the preview, good work. You've got this for a year.
So what you're saying is print everything you could possibly want to print over the course of the next year.
Yeah, trees are your enemy. Burn them all to the ground.
DLP breaches all the way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So look, and I guess this thing with moving towards paperless, I guess it kind of makes sense. I guess, could we reposition this as an environmentally friendly move by Microsoft? Let's do it that way. It's to discourage unnecessary printing.
Yeah, sounds okay.
Not getting any comments from chat on that one. I think the BS detector's going off there.
What
Okay.
BS detector?
Okay, so we're doing a gradual shift. So we went from Azure AD into Universal Print. Do you classify Universal Print as an Azure AD feature?
No, because it doesn't really have anything to do with Azure AD.
Yeah.
Except for groups, and it can be associated to the user via printer, I believe.
Yeah, I guess it's managed in Azure AD. So sure, it's an Azure AD product.
But it's not. Yeah, and it's not in the Azure AD portal, so I guess we can say it's
yeah.
not.
I mean, it's just in Azure.
Yeah. So moving on to the Windows 10/MEM side. Now, I think any of the, at least as far as I noticed, anything Windows 10 related really seemed to be endpoint manager related. Really around monitoring, pushing out updates, etc. Now so some of the things they're like starting to push, release health information about Windows 10 into the M365 Admin Center alongside other alerts. I want to see what kind of things they're putting in, because the screenshots that they included in the announcement around this are really, really, really small. And if you try to zoom in to see anything, there's basically it's just so blurry you can't read anything. So like maybe it's just like advising that maybe this version is reaching end of support, or maybe the upcoming version is going to be available at this point or something. Like I don't know what else they're really going to put in there, because they can't really put in there's a Windows 10 service interruption like they put in with other things underneath service health. So I guess we've got to wait and see what goes in there. Now there's a bunch of different announcements that went into that Windows Update for Business deployment service, and a lot of it, there's a confusing element to this, because there are some services that prior to the chat or prior to us kicking off the recording, things that we thought were kind of fading off into the background. So things like the upgrade analytics solution that Azure has had for many years, that seem to kind of be fading off into the sunset. But now it seems to be part of some of these solutions in terms of being able to get the reporting, etc., that you need. So this is something that kind of threw me a little bit in terms of some of the reporting side. So I'm going to have to spend a bit of time figuring out exactly what's there, going back into my old solution installs to see if they're still picking any of this stuff up. So I'm going to have to dig into it, because I don't think I disabled anything, because anything that you were pushing into that Windows Analytics solution was zero costed. So there was no point deleting it, because it was just data that you could use for other stuff, such as running the correct KQL queries as opposed to the incorrect KQL queries. Now the one that did get a lot of attention and people really did like was being able to manage things like driver and firmware updates through Endpoint Manager / Intune. So not just saying, yes, push out driver and firmware updates, but also being able to start to control them at some point soon. So rather than it being, yes, I want driver and firmware updates, or no, I don't want them, now being able to do a bit more specific targeting around that as well. So that one, I think, is like another nail in the coffin for people who've been looking for reasons to get rid of WSUS.
People still use WSUS?
Yeah.
Yes, they do, Stephen.
Oh.
I have many clients who continue to use it.
Windows Update for Business all the way. Makes life so much easier.
It does.
Set, forget, move on.
If people have still got lots of servers, then, or even if you've
Azure Update.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. You've got a couple of different options there, and if you're not storing, if you've got so few servers that it's not worth pulling the updates down locally, and you're installing them from the cloud anyway, then it starts to get easy to go, hang on, let's just move to a cloud-based solution for that. And some of that stuff around updates, etc., we'll loop back around to that at the end, because there's a few things related to that we'll cover off. But with this, the WSUS side, like if someone's got a lot of servers and they're caching, and not caching, but they're pulling the content down locally, especially like when you're looking at, like if they've got like 20 different flavors of SQL Server floating around, then that's where it's like, okay, pushing those updates out locally makes more sense. But as more and more of that stuff gets decommissioned, if you just end up with a couple of DCs and one or two line of business app servers, it's getting pretty hard to justify the download side of WSUS. The controlling updates, I understand that, but pulling updates down and having to maintain them and fix it when it dies is probably more the issue.
I don't envy people that still need to do that. I understand there's use cases for having WSUS. I really do. But there is a lot easier ways to manage updates now, especially if you can go straight out to Azure Update for your servers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's a set and forget scenario, same as what you can do with Windows Update for Business, where you can sit there and say, this is the window where I'm allowed to install updates. It's going to automatically restart, and all you need to do as an admin is to go back in and say, did it work? Didn't it work? And handle it from there. Okay,
now, has anyone had a chance to, well, I guess you've got to be careful how you respond to this. I've only seen video demonstrations of the expedited security updates, but it's the ability for you to sort of fast track quality updates within a short time frame without messing with your existing upgrade rings, etc. Have any of you had a chance to investigate this any further yet? And I guess probably the scenario for this, it's probably like it really seems like it's a 0-day kind of, let's push something out really, really quickly. It kind of violates the approach we'd normally take for extended testing before pushing things out, but it's something where we just don't really have too much of a choice. Now there is a video that accompanying one of the articles where they talk about it, where they do sort of show the process, and you can see that the quality updates just sits under feature updates over in Endpoint Manager. So it kind of makes sense where it is, but not being able to play with it, it's kind of tough to judge it. But it looks as though you basically are saying, I want to do it and I want to do it quickly. And the goal is to really get that patching across everything down to a couple of days instead of however not long it would normally take, including things like being a bit more aggressive around, forced restarts if needed.
Yeah, Mark, I'll just comment quickly on that one. I think, so your analysis is spot on. What I would say is in V1, if you like, I don't know if it'll exactly manifest in that way. So I definitely think the end goal is urgent patching, as the name implies, and we'll forego the user experience, for the sake of security and forced reboots and so on.
Yeah.
What I would say is the kind of V1 that I've seen is going to look more like you get the devices to catch up to a certain level. In other words, think of like a N-2 or 3 where N is monthly patch Tuesday. So you go and set it to all devices should be current as of Jan, as of Feb, as of December, and you set it to that, and they'll get to that with some more rapid urgency. As opposed to, I guess, what you alluded to, which I think is definitely the end goal, which is there's something out of band has arrived, and we just want to get it out there ASAP. So I don't know if you'll, at least from what I've seen, I don't know if it'll look like exactly the thing that you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think if I go back and watch the video again for it, if I watch it through that description, I'll see if it was just like demo magic, or if I just chose to believe it was something else.
Right. Okay.
It might be a combination of both. I'm not willing to discount the fact that I was hoping for other things.
Oh, well, sorry if I ruined the surprise.
Oh, no. Look, whatever it is, it will do something that people do need. Now, the final one. Standalone connected cache was announced again. I'm not going to bring the link up on screen. I'll let somebody type something into the chat window if they want to share it. But there's a comment from somebody whose name most, if not all of you, will recognize, that I would like you to give a thumbs up to. I would like it to be the most thumbed up, most liked post on tech community. But yeah, this one, so if we sort of go back to what's been announced around the standalone connected cache, so this is where we've got connected cache without having any config manager, no DP requirements, etc. And the way that they're describing the different ways you'll be able to deploy it sound really cool. But my suspicion here is that what we're going to get is probably not going to translate very well to what was originally discussed 2 years ago or whatever when it first started popping up. But some of the things that seem to be the case, it seems to be, it's either going to be like an IIS add-in, so an extension to IIS that's going to be using the W3, what's the service when you're using connected cache, W3 pad or something that does the actual downloading of the DO content. So it's basically a standalone version of that would be an IIS add-on, or alternatively downloading it as a Linux container. And the management for either option would be completely done through the Azure portal. And Kwok has found the posts that we need to give a thumbs up to.
Also, you can just
thumbs up.
You can just scroll up to the top of the chat. It's there.
Yeah. So with connected cache, there's obviously something big that they're having trouble with here. Like, even if they just sort of deploy it in a really scaled back approach, because even if you take a look at what you can configure with connected cache today, what can you do? You can say, here's the drive that I want it on, and here's how much space I want it to be able to consume. Like, maybe they're trying to improve the product at the same time by saying, don't just wipe it when your allocation fills and start from scratch. Maybe they're trying to make it a bit more of an incremental delete service as opposed to a wipe and reload type scenario. I don't know. But this is something that, this was supposed to be out. Whatever Ignite it was that they announced it at, it was supposed to be like the following quarter. So this one, I'm actually surprised they even brought it up again. I think it would be better to go dark and then bring it up and go, look at what we've got ready for you.
Just to clarify here, connected cache is
Doink server.
Doink.
Doink. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Delivery optimization in network cache.
Yeah.
Yes. Doink, aka the best acronym in the world that has been removed.
Actually, and just as a side conversation, if any of you have used Doink and or Config Manager alongside proxies or caching proxies, can you just drop a comment into the chat window, because I might have a few questions, or not, I do have a few questions for you on that. So if anyone wants to become my squid support engineer, I pay good money. I pay in calamari for squid support. Okay, now for Sentinel, there's a ton of stuff that was announced, but I just want to focus on things that are the things that are more focused on what we tend to talk about here. So now we've got playbooks in there that will go through, and because now they've got the stronger integration between Sentinel and M365 Defender, that means that now it can basically be pulling in those, the incidents from Intune or identity protection, for example, so that we can block an endpoint device from the Sentinel side. And also, the other example here is that changing the risk state of a user with identity protection issues. So the other thing that I really liked, that it may have existed before, but I just hadn't really noticed it, but the diagram that's up here is so simple, but it's really effective in describing the relationship between M365 Defender, Azure Defender, and Sentinel. Now, don't be smart and ask about all the different things that are part of Azure Defender or M365 Defender. But the wording here around, M365 Defender secures your end users, Azure Defender secures your infrastructure, and then Sentinel brings together all the different signals across the organization. So they're pretty simple descriptions that I think I'll have to rely on using variations of those, because the confusion when people go, why does Microsoft have so many different security offerings? I think this is a good way to help position at least some of that. Now, there are a bunch of new connectors added in, so I think it's up around 100 connectors all up now. Jupyter Notebooks hit general availability. Now, do any of you work with Jupyter Notebooks?
No, but it's something that I would like to get into. It's fantastic as far as documenting process and also documenting repeatable errors. It's fantastic in that way.
Yeah, because I was looking through it, and on the technology side, where it's like, oh, hang on, it's deploying stuff inside of a VM. So basically, you're getting provisioned like an environment of sorts for it to run in. So it's one of those things where there's like so many moving parts to it.
Mm-hmm.
But because I'd sort of seen references to Jupyter Notebooks for God knows how long with Sentinel, I just assumed, this was another thing that I just assumed was GA for a while. Okay, now I think, Quoc sort of found, the Doink, the standalone server was announced at Ignite 2019. So was that like that would have been like August, July?
That was the second.
First week of November.
Yeah, that was the second Florida Ignite.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The one that wasn't. Yeah, because that was the concern with Ignite being held so late last year, was that it was going to be around election time, I think.
Yes.
So 2018 was in October, and then they pushed it back a couple of weeks for 2019.
Because of the hurricane season in 2018.
Yeah, so this one, so Doink, so even if any of you are on the Windows Customer Connection program, I think that's where they were sharing a bit of information around it, but they sort of went quiet there. So I think they're sort of getting some work done. Now, just a couple more slides. So on the M365 Defender side, now we don't really normally talk about server too much in here, but I just wanted to throw this one in here in particular, because when we've covered or when it was Defender ATP before it became Defender for Endpoint, like I think Ben demonstrated some stuff around using live response on a Win 10 client with Steve. But that's now something that's been added, so it now supports it for Server 2019 as well. So, so basically extending more of that Win 10/Defender integration into the server side. Now, the other one here, and for those of you who aren't aware of what live response is, you're basically getting like a remote shell, command line shell in. Now, I think originally there were a lot of restrictions around what you could and couldn't run in there, weren't there? So I think early on you couldn't run PowerShell or anything, but can you run PowerShell scripts from it now? I've got a feeling they've updated it a bit. So there's, yeah, maybe we need to do another Defender for Endpoint session. Actually, we've never done a Defender for Endpoint session. We've only done a Defender ATP session. So, you know, completely different thing. Okay, now the other thing here is that was added in, and this is in the Defender for Endpoint UI. Actually, I shouldn't say Defender for Endpoint UI because it may not be in there for you, which we'll talk about in a moment, but enabling the single switch tamper protection. Now, just generally with the tamper protection pieces, I think a bunch of the Microsoft Docs articles have been a little bit problematic in the way that they're describing the requirements for that. So I think sometimes you'll see that the requirements are that you need to have, or people will interpret it as saying that you need to have Intune or something like that. But it's more that Intune is required for the Endpoint Manager tutorial they're about to walk you through. So I think the tamper protection stuff will work on, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but like your Win 10 Pro, Win 10 Education, and Win 10 Enterprise. I also think it might even be, I'm pretty sure it might also be available in home as well, if anyone knows. Because I can remember people getting a little bit upset going, how come tamper protection is in home, but it's not in pro? But it was just the way people were interpreting disconnected, posts or articles over on Docs. Now, the final piece in here is Defender for Endpoint and Defender for Office 365 are both now natively available through Security Center. So security.microsoft.com does have both your Defender for Endpoint and O365 in there. But you can also set a switch in the Defender for Endpoint settings so that it automatically redirects from the Security Center URLs through to security.microsoft.com. So if you're managing everything, kind of a smart thing to do. If you're not managing everything, you probably don't want to throw this at the endpoint management people and have them go, why am I getting thrown to this other portal without warning? But so finally, securitycenter.windows.com, we can still hit it, but we can also automatically redirect away from it.
Yep.
Now, the final thing, I mentioned that we had one more thing on server that I wanted to throw in here. And I think we can sort of talk about a few other things in here as well, but finally, hot patching coming to Azure. Now, this is for, I know it's for Windows VMs. I'm not too sure if it's for Linux. I think Linux VMs have probably already got some of that type of functionality anyway. I'll edit that bit out. But this is something that I think the Azure team have been talking about for a long time. The Windows Server team have been talking about for a long time. But finally, the rebootless seems like a really weird term. Like who do any of you use the word?
What it says.
I know, but how many of you would use that as a word? Rebootless.
What else would you name it as, Mark?
Hot patch. But then you'd have to explain what hot patching is.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was. That's what it was called years ago.
It sounds like you're going to go and put a little bit of asphalt on the footpath out the front because there's a pothole.
Yeah. Okay, so this one is, overall, like I guess for the things we normally cover, this one's probably not all that critical. But I think just in the general scheme of things, Windows, even though it's restricted to Azure at the moment anyway, the fact that this is now a thing, even in preview, is something that people have wanted for decades from Windows Server. So, as to where else it ends up rolling out, does it make it out to client OSs? Does it make it into like Hyper-V environments on-prem or anything like that? Like, who knows? But as you need to be part of Auto Manage in order to get that capability. I think Auto Manage is still free while it's in preview. I don't know what the costs are going to be once it's out of preview. But probably the other thing there is it's just just to tie it back to one other thing that Steve said was update management. So if you want to use the update management solution in Azure for your Azure VMs as well as for on-prem, just use it. Like, what would you be paying? A couple of cents per month for what's managed? Like, I can't imagine there'd be too much of a cost associated with it. Now, that's pretty much the vast majority of the things that I called out. So I guess just over in the chat window, I just want to see if there's anything else that's been called out. I can't see anything. Oh yeah, so following up, there's so a link to sign up for the Doink. Actually, got to stop. I'll keep calling that Doink.
Call it
standalone.
Doink. If we say it,
Doink.
If we say it enough, it'll come back.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
No, that's fine. I'm willing to die on that hill.
Okay, so I guess so that sort of officially ends, or that ends the official bit where we'll stop the recording now, so that way anyone who's got questions, etc., or topics that they don't want recorded, we can kick that off. So let me just stop the record, and then we can switch over to that. So let's do stop recording.